July 29, 2022. Will you be a marshmallow for someone today? 3 years ago, my family and I thought we knew exactly what we were getting into when we took off on a 2-week homeschool history field trip extravaganza from Atlanta to Boston and back to see the birthplace of liberty and the Constitution, the end of the Revolutionary War, the beginning of our nation, and the homes and final resting places of guys like Ben Franklin, John Adams, and George Washington. But we never expected we'd see the final resting place of my kid brother, Jeremy. This kid had become such an encouragement to people. He had overcome more junk from our childhood than I care to mention. He had spun his wheels in so many different trades that when he finally became a licensed barber, put his feet down and became owner of the barbershop where we used to get our hair cut as kids on Cape Cod, I thought he had finally found his place, some freedom and some peace. I was so proud of him. Here's a picture of my son getting his first haircut from Uncle Jeremy at age 1. We actually waited till we could make the trip to New England to get his haircut. And I was sure now that he was 9, he was going to get a big boy haircut from Uncle Jay. But instead, we walked into a barbershop that hadn't been so closed for business in over 50 years because he was gone. Instead of freedom, he'd found slavery and overdose. But just because you've got the world on your shoulders doesn't mean you can't find freedom. So if you've still got breath, then you've got purpose and time. You mind if we talk about how you can use what's left? First off, stop believing the lie that you've got more time. I had a full day on our trip planned out where we were going to spend the whole day with my brother and my family, and we did. It was just at a funeral home instead of his home. We assumed that we had more time with him than we did, which brings us to the application of this. Send flowers to the living. There were plenty of flowers at the funeral home that day, but from the casket, he couldn't see or smell any of them. So many nice things said about him that day, but were those things said louder and more often to his face while he was still alive, he may have escaped the path he was on. Maybe. There's no shame or blame or condemnation for anybody here, just a warning. Use your words now while the living can hear them. Who in your life needs to hear, "I'm so proud of you. I love you. I was wrong. Will you please forgive me?" Or, "Hey, how are you really doing?" Soak yourself in community and accountability. We are not designed to walk this road alone. Self-made men dig their own graves, and if they could, they'd fill them in on their own too. Am I wrong? And if you're an addict, listen, don't tell me your wife is your accountability. I've been an addict myself, 20 years clean from porn. And you and I both know when we're in addiction, we get really good at protecting our addiction, which includes hiding it from those closest to us. So find a guy who will pry. Join a program, get in a group, whatever you got to do to get clean and stay clean. Look, breaking addiction takes more power than you and I have got in us. We need something bigger. And while most of you aren't surprised to hear that I'm a Christ follower, many would be surprised to know that Jesus never said, "Clean up your act and then come see me." Nowhere does the Bible say, "Come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you a long list of things that you stink at." No. It says, "I will give you rest." In other words, come to me and I'll help you clean up your act and stay clean. For though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Grieve wisely and well. The best advice I could have given somebody in my shoes 3 years ago would have been go to griefshare.org, drop your zip code in there, and find a grief share group yesterday. So I took my own advice. We got back from our trip to Georgia on a Tuesday, and I was in a group by Wednesday. 3 years later, I still grieve here and there. That's natural and normal, but it's lighter and less often because the heavy lifting of grief was done in the first few months based on an intentional grieving strategy, which sounds weird, doesn't it? I've just learned that solo and improvised grief is lazy and sloppy grief. Do you really want to take the long, winding road to healing when there's a shorter, straighter, paved path? If you've lost someone or fear losing them now, know this. Adults, most of the time, make adult decisions. Decisions have consequences, and adults are ultimately responsible for their decisions. Someone ODs, not your fault. Takes their life, not your fault. If you contributed, find forgiveness, but know that you are responsible for your decisions, not theirs. Bathing in guilt after the fact is a waste of your time. I could have, should have, would have, wish I'd have, if only. Those are lies born out of the pit of hell. Do not let those thoughts take up any long-term neurological real estate in your head. Meet someone where they're at today. Maybe the guy behind the counter or the gal on the other end of the phone is having bad day number 37 in a row, and neurologically they're in the middle of a downward spiral. Let them know they matter to God who created them for a purpose. If you're a parent with a struggling kid, maybe they don't communicate to you very often or well, I want you to reach out to me personally, and I will give you a link to the Life Purpose Scan. It's free. It's developed by a good friend of mine, and I want you to have your kid take it so that you can get an x-ray of what's going on in their head and their heart. It's an early warning sign if they're headed for danger, overdose, or even suicide. And be available. Some Christians might miss this, but you don't have to. You don't have to go to a church building to be the church. The word church, ecclesia, means gathering, not building. And 3 years ago, my church family was there for me, even though I was 1,200 miles away. But God also saw fit to surround me by family and over 80 men who most of whom don't even profess Christ. Yet they were there, being Christ-like, hugging me, hanging with me, singing together, being present and safe place to break my fall. They were my soft landing on a massive marshmallow after plummeting off an emotional cliff. Many were simply present and silent, like a marshmallow, which was sweet to my grieving soul, like a marshmallow. I needed that then, and someone you know needs that now. So will you go be a marshmallow to someone? Be sweet and maybe even say nothing, but just break their fall and stick to them until they can get up and walk on their own again. Grace and peace.